Good day everyone. So with Nahida's really successful release, I believe that the Genshin developers have scored a bunch of own goals. So let's sort of talk about this. Now, it's no real secret that Nahida is a pretty character, she's got great animations, and of course her combat is so good because it just enables so many different teams. And yet the same developers that developed this character for the purpose of selling this character to a lot of people, inducing FOMO, you don't want to miss out and so on, are the same developers that have said, well, we have a very casual game. Not everyone's interested in the Spiral Abyss or Musgrave or combat, and of course, not all characters are measured by their numerical value. So this is okay, and it's understandable, but it gives a very big contradiction because if you have a character that has premium animations that is very clearly much stronger than most of the old cast in Genshin Impact, then what is the value of that old cast? Because we're still stuck with Ganyu Quest 1, we're still stuck with old voice lines with very few character skins, we're stuck with loads of NPCs that we need to talk to in Archon Quest and in Character Quest instead of having a proper integration with the big cast of Genshin Impact. And this to me is really contradictory because on the one hand, players tell Hoyo that they suffer from anxiety. So what Hoyo does is they release a character that makes farming a lot easier. It makes easier to beat up enemies in the overworld. And yet, on the other hand, we are told that, don't worry, the reason why players are anxious and are struggling is because, they struggle with the Spiral Abyss. And one way to alleviate that is, of course, to buff some of the older units that people have gotten and that they like. And yet Hoyo says, well, we're not going to do that because, numerical strength is only one dimension. But when you ask, well, where are the other dimensions? We don't have it. And then Hoyo releases a character that has these other dimensions, that has really cool animations, that does have like a cool story quest. I mean, there are 5 Archon chapters or whatever. It is really insane. So, in my opinion, I think what's really happening is that you have a massive churning of the Genshin Impact's casual player base. In other words, there are large amounts of players that play the game and then they'll just sort of log off, perhaps for 2-3 months, and then they'll get back in. They might struggle with an event, they send a survey, no, I don't like this, and then they'll go back to a different event, game or whatever. And this is the problem with Genshin Impact. The amount of people that give feedback is almost treated equivalently regardless of who you are as a player. So for those of us that are AR60 long-time players, we really have enjoyed all the casual and the sort of hardcore combat aspects of the game. For us, our voice, our experience of the game as people that can provide the most critical inputs towards what we want from the game and its success is being given equal value to the average little 9-year-old Timmy that's going to play for 10 minutes before he's sort of legally obliged to not play anymore because of some stupid laws in a country. And this to me is exactly where the problem comes in Genshin Impact, because how do you then cater to these casual players? Well, what do? Well, you release new content, new animations, you release new characters that are very strong and powerful, people get into the new characters, and yet at the same time what you're doing is you're fragmenting your player base by saying, well, this is only casual, and at worst you're also sort of devaluing the value of the older units, the very reason people started to play Genshin. And to me it's almost like, well, what is the direction for this game? So this is my big problems. Nahida's release indicates something that I've spoken about on this channel, and that is that we have character creep. We've got a situation where all the units just don't mean anything because new units are there to sell, and we sort of, for the very short time that they're released, are just going to focus on them before eventually relegating them and going on to new units. And the second thing is Genshin suffers from feature creep, where we're introducing systems that are not tied to the core fundamentals of an action RPG role-playing game, ARPG, and this is where Genshin, I think, starts to tries to be too broad in its scope. In other words, we want to introduce systems like fishing, which no one really cares about, like the trading card game, and these things are devolved from what made the game good in the first place. In other words, we're trying to squeeze in too much, and at the expense of losing the identity of Genshin. Now, don't get me wrong, a trading card game there's nothing wrong with having a trading card game. In fact, if they had developed this as a standalone game where you can have characters from, let's say, the Genshin universe, the Honkai universe, Tears of Famous, whatever, that would be really, really cool. But the problem is, because you're trying to squeeze in these too many features, I have to sit back and ask myself a question, well, what's the point of then playing your other games? Why are you purposefully taking away resources from making Genshin a really, really good game and making Zenless Zone Zero and what's the other one, Star Rail and whatever? Why are you developing more games precisely to cater to a wider audience and to cast your net wider, and yet you're sort of trying to achieve that same effect by introducing more systems into Genshin? It's just going to be a confusing mess, and for me, it's just a rabbit hole that Hoyo is going down, and I feel like this is where the guys at the top, or whoever's making decisions at Hoyo, is lacking strategic direction. And we can feel it. We can honestly feel it in the game. It does start to feel clunky and wonky, and there's too much text, and there's too many systems baked within systems. And honestly, all I can say is, Hoyo, you've got to be careful, because if you mess up this balance, then Genshin Impact's going to be a game that will start losing popularity, and you're not going to get it back. A very big reason for this is going to be new player lockout, and the only way in which you're going to remedy this is by introducing stronger characters that can compensate. But yet again, because characters are region locked and you can only get resources by farming in other later parts of the game, it's not going to work. It's just, I don't know. Hoyo's got a big mess on their plate. And I do think that they should rather keep to the core fundamentals. So I'm hoping that with Nahida's release, people can actually start enjoying combat more, and that the player base can be more focused in terms of giving Hoyo feedback and saying, yeah, combat systems are cool. Don't get me wrong, trading card games, all of these other casual aspects are fine. They're fine as events. But as part of the core fundamentals of the game, they should not be permanent. So yeah, I know this has been like a very, very complicated topic, and I've spoken about a lot of different issues, but at the end of the day, my big point is Hoyo, by casting their net too wide, is hitting a lot of own goals, and we can see it.